there is a reason you clicked on this video. Out of the millions of videos on the internet, out of all the distractions, all the noise, all the moments that could have pulled your attention somewhere else, you ended up here, right now, listening to these words. That is not an accident. Because God has a way of reaching his chosen people at the exact moment they need it most. Sometimes he whispers through pain. Sometimes he speaks through silence. And sometimes he brings a message directly to your soul when you are on the edge of giving up. You may have been feeling lost lately, confused, drained, like nobody understands the battle happening inside your mind. You smile in front of people, but deep down you have been carrying a weight you cannot explain. But hear this clearly, God sees everything. He saw every tear you cried in private. He heard every prayer you whispered at night. He watched you survive battles that should have broken you. And the reason you are still standing is because heaven has not abandoned you. The enemy tried to convince you that your life had no purpose, that you were forgotten, delayed, rejected. But what if the delays were preparation? What if the isolation was protection? What if every painful season was shaping you for something greater than you can imagine? Because chosen ones do not walk ordinary paths. God often separates those he plans to elevate. He allows storms because storms reveal strength. He allows pressure because pressure creates diamonds. And maybe today, God brought you here to remind you who you really are. Not weak, not defeated, not forgotten, but chosen. So before we begin, I want you to do something powerful. If you truly believe God led you to this message for a reason, type "I am chosen" in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to this channel so you never miss the messages God may be sending directly to your spirit. God never calls people by accident, and that is something the enemy never wants you to understand. Because the moment you realize your life has purpose, the moment you recognize that God's hand has been on you since the very beginning, everything changes. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as someone heaven intentionally set apart. Think about your life for a moment. Think about all the situations you survived that should have destroyed you, the heartbreaks that almost crushed your spirit, the silent battles nobody knew you were fighting, the nights you cried yourself to sleep asking God why your path felt so heavy while everyone else seemed to move forward so easily. Yet somehow, despite all the pressure, despite all the pain, you are still here. That is not luck, that is not coincidence, that is God. Because when God places a calling on someone's life, he protects them differently. The storms may come, but they do not have permission to destroy what heaven has chosen. And maybe that explains why your life has always felt different. Maybe that explains why you never fully fit in with the crowd. Deep down, you always sensed there was something more about your journey, even if you could not explain it. Chosen people often feel isolated before they feel understood. God begins separating them long before he reveals why. You may have wondered why certain people walked away from your life, why some doors suddenly closed, why opportunities disappeared right when you thought things were finally getting better. But what if God was protecting your destiny? What if he was removing distractions that could have delayed your purpose? Sometimes rejection is heaven's redirection. Sometimes the people who leave are making room for the people God is sending. And sometimes the closed doors are proof that God refuses to let you settle for less than what he planned for you. The enemy wants you to believe your struggles mean God has abandoned you. But the truth is, many of God's greatest servants went through seasons of confusion before stepping into their purpose. Joseph was betrayed before he became a leader. David fought lions and giants before becoming king. Moses wandered through the wilderness before delivering a nation. Their pain was not proof of God's absence, it was preparation. And your pain is preparing you too. Every difficult season has been building strength inside you that comfort could never create. Every disappointment taught you how to trust God deeper. Every lonely night forced you to depend on heaven instead of people. You were being trained spiritually, even when you thought you were falling apart. That is why this message matters. Because God brought you here to remember that your life is not random. You are not just another face in the crowd. You are not here merely to survive. You were created with intention. Before you were even born, God already knew your name, your battles, your tears, and your future. He knew there would be moments when you would feel exhausted. Moments when fear would whisper that you are not enough. Moments when you would question whether your prayers were being heard. But God also knew you would overcome. The reason the enemy attacks your mind so heavily is because he fears what happens when you finally awaken to your purpose. Darkness trembles when chosen people remember who they are, because a person who knows God has called them cannot be easily broken by temporary pain. And maybe that is exactly why you are listening to this right now, not by accident, not randomly, not because the algorithm decided it, but because God knew your spirit needed this reminder today. He knew you were growing tired. He knew you were carrying hidden battles. He knew you needed confirmation that He is still with you. And this is your confirmation. God has not forgotten you. He has not abandoned your future. He has not ignored your prayers. Even in silence, He was working. Even in delay, He was positioning things. Even in your brokenness, He was shaping you into the person you were meant to become. One day you will look back and realize that every painful chapter had purpose behind it. The confusion taught you wisdom. The betrayal taught you discernment. The waiting taught you patience. And the suffering taught you how to hear God's voice more clearly. So stop doubting your value. Stop believing the lie that your life means nothing. Stop allowing fear to convince you that you were forgotten. You were chosen intentionally by God. And when heaven calls someone, no amount of darkness can cancel what God has already ordained. Your struggles were never punishment. They were preparation. And that truth is difficult to understand when you are in the middle of the storm, because pain has a way of making you feel abandoned. It makes you question yourself. It makes you wonder why life has been so heavy for you while others seem to move forward without resistance. There were moments when you probably asked God, "Why me?" Moments when you felt forgotten, exhausted, and emotionally drained from carrying burdens nobody else could see. But what if the battles you faced were not sent to destroy you? What if they were shaping you into the person God called you to become? The truth is, God often prepares chosen people through hardship, not because He hates them, but because He knows the weight of the purpose they carry. Great callings require great strength, and strength is not built during easy seasons. It is built in moments of pressure, heartbreak, waiting, and uncertainty. Think about a diamond for a moment. Before it shines brilliantly, it must first endure crushing pressure deep beneath the earth. Without the pressure, there is no transformation. And in the same way, the pressure you have been feeling may actually be evidence that God is forming something powerful inside you. The enemy wanted you to see your suffering as proof that you were cursed, but heaven sees it differently. Heaven sees someone being refined, someone being strengthened spiritually, someone learning how to depend on God in ways ordinary people never will. Because when everything else was stripped away, you discovered that God was still enough. Some of your hardest seasons forced you to pray harder than ever before. They forced you to seek God when nobody else could help you. The betrayal taught you discernment. The loneliness taught you how to stand alone with God. The delays taught you patience. The heartbreak taught you that human approval cannot replace divine purpose. You thought you were falling apart, but in reality, God was rebuilding you. And maybe now you understand why your journey has felt so different from everyone else's. Chosen people are trained in private before they are revealed publicly. God works deeply in their spirit before He elevates them openly. The world often sees the blessing but never sees the breaking season that came before it. Nobody sees the tears. Nobody sees the sleepless nights. Nobody sees the spiritual warfare. But God sees all of it. He saw every moment you almost gave up but kept going anyway. He saw the faith you held on to even when your prayers seemed unanswered. And every painful chapter you survived was adding another layer of strength to your spirit. That is why the enemy fought you so hard. Because pain can either break a person or awaken them. And the enemy was hoping your struggles would make you lose faith completely. He wanted disappointment to harden your heart. He wanted rejection to make you doubt your worth. He wanted the waiting season to convince you that God had abandoned you. But you are still here, still praying, still surviving, still searching for God despite everything you endured, and that alone proves there is something powerful about your spirit. The people around you may not fully understand your journey because they did not feel the battles you fought internally. Some wounds never left visible scars, yet they changed you deeply. You became stronger, wiser, more discerning. The version of you that exists today was created through survival. And sometimes God allows certain storms because the old version of you cannot carry the future He has planned. The pain changed your perspective. The waiting changed your priorities. The suffering changed your relationship with God. You no longer depend on temporary things the way you once did. You have learned that money cannot heal the soul, attention cannot replace peace, and people cannot fill the emptiness that only God can touch. That lesson came through struggle, but now your spirit is stronger because of it. One day you will realize that the seasons you hated the most were the seasons that transformed you the deepest. If everything had happened easily, you would not have grown spiritually. You would not have developed the endurance, wisdom, and faith you carry today. God was preparing you for battles you have not even seen yet, because the purpose over your life is bigger than your current pain, and that is why you cannot quit now. The enemy thought the pressure would destroy you, but instead it created resilience. He thought isolation would weaken you, but it pushed you closer to God. He thought delays would make you hopeless, but they taught you how to trust divine timing. Everything you survived had purpose attached to it, even the pain, even the rejection, even the confusion. Nothing was wasted. God was using every difficult moment to shape your character, strengthen your spirit, and prepare you for the destiny waiting ahead of you. So stop seeing yourself as someone being punished. You are someone being prepared. And when God finishes preparing a chosen person, no force on earth can stop the purpose heaven has already written over their life. The enemy attacks those who carry purpose. That is why your life has never felt easy. That is why, no matter how hard you try to move forward, there always seems to be resistance. The battles you fight are not random. The pressure you feel is not meaningless. There is a spiritual reason behind the warfare surrounding your life. Because darkness does not waste energy attacking empty vessels. The enemy targets people who carry light, people with destiny, people chosen by God to break chains, inspire others, and walk in divine purpose. And whether you realized it or not, the intensity of your battles has been revealing the intensity of the calling over your life. Think about it. Why have you faced so much opposition since the beginning? Why did certain people misunderstand you for no reason? Why did doors close unexpectedly? Why have you had to battle fear, anxiety, doubt, loneliness, and discouragement so often? It is because there is something valuable inside you that the enemy fears. The enemy studies potential. He recognizes purpose before many people do. That is why attacks often increase right before breakthrough. The closer a chosen person gets to awakening spiritually, the more darkness tries to create confusion around them. And maybe now certain things in your life finally make sense. Maybe the constant discouragement was not because you were weak. Maybe the heavy spiritual battles were not because you were cursed. Maybe the isolation was not proof that God abandoned you. Maybe it was all evidence that your destiny carries power. Because ordinary people do not threaten darkness, but chosen people do. The enemy knows that if you ever fully realize who God created you to be, you will become unstoppable spiritually. So his greatest strategy is not always destruction. Sometimes it is distraction. Sometimes it is exhaustion. Sometimes it is convincing you to doubt yourself long enough to walk away from your purpose voluntarily. That is why the attacks often happen in your mind first. The enemy whispers lies like, "You are not good enough. You will never succeed. God has forgotten you. You are too broken to be used." But those lies only exist because the truth is dangerous to darkness. The truth is that God's hand is on your life. The truth is that your survival already proves divine protection. The truth is that your future carries influence, impact, and purpose. And the enemy cannot stop what God has ordained, so he tries to stop your belief instead. That is why spiritual warfare feels so exhausting sometimes. It is not always physical battles. Often it is internal warfare. It is waking up with unexplained heaviness. It is fighting negative thoughts. It is feeling emotionally drained after trying to do the right thing. It is carrying silent burdens nobody around you fully understands. But hear this clearly. Your struggle is not proof that God left you. In many cases, it is proof that you are spiritually significant. Look throughout the Bible. The people closest to their purpose often faced the greatest opposition. Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers because of the dream God placed inside him. David was hunted before becoming king. Jesus himself was tempted, attacked, rejected, and crucified because of the power he carried. Purpose attracts warfare. And if your life has been marked by unusual battles, it may be because heaven has marked you for something unusual as well. The enemy wanted the attacks to make you bitter, but instead they are making you stronger. Every battle sharpened your discernment. Every betrayal taught you wisdom. Every lonely season forced you closer to God. The very things meant to destroy your spirit are becoming the foundation of your spiritual growth. That is why you cannot let the warfare convince you to quit now. You are too close to the reason the attack started in the first place. Sometimes the enemy attacks hardest when he senses transformation happening. Right before breakthrough, confusion increases. Right before elevation, resistance intensifies. Right before healing, darkness fights harder to keep you trapped in your old identity. But the attacks reveal something powerful. The enemy sees value in your future even when you cannot. And if darkness is reacting this strongly to your existence, imagine how powerful your purpose must truly be. You were never meant to live small. You were never meant to stay spiritually asleep. You were never meant to spend your life trapped in fear. God called you to rise above the attacks, not surrender to them. And the beautiful thing is this: every battle you survived already proves that God has been protecting you all along. There were moments you should have broken completely, but somehow you made it through. There were nights you thought you could not continue, yet you woke up the next morning with strength you cannot explain. That was not your own power. That was God sustaining you in the middle of spiritual warfare. The enemy underestimated the strength God placed inside you. He thought rejection would destroy you. He thought delays would weaken you. He thought pain would silence your spirit forever. But instead of destroying you, the battles awakened you. Now you pray differently. Now you discern differently. Now you trust God differently. And the version of you emerging from this season is far stronger than the version that entered it. So do not fear the warfare around your life. Recognize what it reveals. It reveals that your purpose is real. It reveals that your calling matters. It reveals that heaven has marked your life for something greater than you can currently see. And no attack from the enemy can cancel a destiny that God Himself has already chosen. God often separates chosen people from the crowd before He reveals their true purpose. And if you have been feeling isolated lately, if you have felt misunderstood, disconnected, or distant from people you once thought would always be part of your life, this may not be happening by accident. Sometimes separation is not rejection. Sometimes it is divine protection. There are seasons when God intentionally pulls chosen people away from noise, distractions, and unhealthy attachments because He knows certain environments cannot carry the future He planned for them. And while isolation feels painful in the moment, it often becomes the place where spiritual transformation begins. That is why your journey may have felt lonely for so long. You noticed you could not fully connect with everyone around you anymore. Conversations that once entertained you now feel empty. Crowds exhaust you. Certain friendships no longer align with your spirit. You began craving peace more than popularity, depth more than attention, and God more than approval. At first, this shift confused you. You wondered if something was wrong with you. You wondered why you felt different. You wondered why people slowly drifted away from your life. But the truth is, God was creating distance for a reason. Chosen people cannot remain attached to environments that keep them spiritually asleep. Before God elevates someone, He often separates them. He removes distractions that would interfere with the calling on their life. And unfortunately, not everyone assigned to one season can follow you into the next one. That hurts sometimes, because human nature wants connection. We want people to understand us, support us, and walk beside us through every season. But there are moments when God allows loneliness because He knows intimacy with Him cannot grow properly in constant noise. Isolation becomes the classroom where God speaks the loudest. Some of the deepest spiritual lessons are learned in private battles nobody else sees. In those quiet moments, God strips away false identities, unhealthy attachments, pride, fear, and dependence on human validation. He teaches chosen people how to hear His voice clearly without needing constant approval from the world. And maybe that explains why your isolation changed you so deeply. You became more reflective, more discerning, more spiritually aware. The pain of being alone forced you to confront parts of yourself you used to avoid. You had no choice but to sit with your thoughts, your wounds, your fears, and your relationship with God. And although it felt uncomfortable, something powerful was happening inside you during that process. You were growing. The enemy wanted isolation to make you feel abandoned, but God was using it to make you stronger spiritually. Because sometimes people become so dependent on external voices that they forget how to listen to God internally. Isolation removes distractions and forces chosen people back into alignment with heaven. Think about many of the people God used powerfully in Scripture. Moses spent years in the wilderness before leading a nation. David spent lonely seasons as a shepherd before becoming king. Jesus himself often withdrew from crowds to pray alone. Solitude was not punishment for them, it was preparation. And your isolation may be preparation too. The world often misunderstands chosen people because their spirit no longer fits comfortably into ordinary patterns. While others chase temporary things, your soul keeps searching for something deeper. While others seek validation from people, your spirit longs for peace from God. That difference can make you feel disconnected from the crowd. But different does not mean broken. It means called. There is a reason you cannot fully return to the person you used to be. God has already started transforming your spirit. The things that once satisfied you no longer fulfill you because your soul is awakening to a higher purpose. And yes, sometimes that awakening feels lonely. There are nights when you wish someone truly understood your internal battles. There are moments when the silence feels overwhelming. There are seasons when you wonder if the isolation will ever end. But what if this lonely season is actually sacred? What if God pulled you away because he wanted your attention fully? What if he allowed certain relationships to fade because they were blocking your spiritual growth? What if the silence was preparing you to hear his voice more clearly than ever before? Because God cannot always reveal destiny in the middle of distraction. Some people had to leave because they were attached to the old version of you. Some environments had to close because they were limiting your growth. Some seasons had to end because God knew you were meant for more. And although separation hurts, it is often evidence that transformation is happening. The caterpillar cannot become a butterfly while remaining attached to its previous form. Transformation requires isolation before elevation. And in the same way, God sometimes hides chosen people temporarily while he prepares them for the next chapter of their life. So stop interpreting your loneliness as proof that you are forgotten. You are being refined. God is teaching you how to stand spiritually strong even when nobody applauds you. He is teaching you how to trust him even when human support disappears. He is building a deeper faith inside you, one that does not depend on circumstances or external validation. And one day, you will understand why this separation was necessary. You will realize that God removed what was draining you. He protected you from what could have destroyed you. He isolated you so he could transform you. Because chosen people are often separated before they are elevated. And the same God who allowed this season of isolation is also preparing a future where everything will finally make sense. Your current season is not your final chapter. Even if life feels heavy right now, even if you feel stuck, delayed, or emotionally exhausted, you must understand this truth. God is still writing your story. What you are experiencing in this moment is not the end. It is only a chapter. And chapters change. The enemy wants you to believe that the pain you feel today will last forever. He wants temporary struggles to look permanent. That is why discouragement hits hardest when you are in the middle of uncertainty, when prayers seem unanswered, when doors stay closed, when progress feels invisible, when you are trying your best, yet nothing around you seems to change. Those are the moments when hopelessness whispers the loudest. You start wondering if things will ever get better. You question whether God is still listening. You secretly fear that maybe your best days are already behind you. But God did not bring you this far just to abandon you in the middle of the process. The waiting season is not evidence that God stopped working. In fact, some of God's greatest work happens in silence. While you are worrying, heaven is arranging things you cannot yet see. While you feel delayed, God is positioning people, opportunities, healing, wisdom, and timing in ways your human mind cannot fully understand yet. Because God sees the entire picture while you only see the current moment. Right now, your vision may be limited by pain. You see closed doors, disappointment, loneliness, and unanswered questions. But God sees purpose developing behind the scenes. He sees the future version of you stronger, wiser, healed, and walking in the very breakthrough you once cried about. And one day, what feels confusing now will make sense. Many chosen people go through seasons where everything appears to be falling apart before their lives finally come together. God often allows uncomfortable transitions because growth requires change. The old version of you cannot carry the future God prepared for you. Certain mindsets, habits, relationships, and fears must break before elevation can happen. That process is painful. Transformation always is. A seed must first be buried before it grows. And during burial, everything looks dark. hidden, silent, uncertain. But beneath the surface, life is developing. Roots are forming. Growth is happening invisibly. And maybe that is exactly what God is doing in your life right now. You feel buried, but heaven says you are planted. There is a difference. Burial looks like an ending. Planting creates a future. The enemy wants you to interpret this season as failure, but God sees preparation. He knows the timing of your breakthrough. He knows when the right doors will open. He knows when your healing will fully manifest. And he knows that if certain blessings arrived too early, they might have destroyed you instead of helping you. That is why divine timing matters. Sometimes God delays things not to punish you, but to protect you. What feels like rejection today may actually be redirection towards something far greater than what you originally wanted. Some opportunities had to fail because they were too small for your calling. Some relationships had to end because they were connected to your past, not your future. But when you are hurting, it is difficult to see that clearly. Pain narrows perspective. That is why faith becomes so important in seasons like this. Faith is trusting God even when circumstances do not make sense yet. Faith is believing there is purpose in the waiting. Faith is understanding that silence does not mean abandonment. Because even when you cannot see movement, God is still moving. Think about all the times in your life when you thought everything was over, yet somehow God carried you through. There were moments you believed you would never recover emotionally. Seasons you thought would completely destroy your spirit, yet here you are today, still standing. That alone proves your story is not finished. The enemy tried to break you multiple times, but he failed every single time. And the reason he failed is because God's purpose over your life is stronger than the attacks against you. Your survival is evidence that heaven still has plans for you. Chosen people often feel the most discouraged right before breakthrough arrives. That is because darkness wants them to quit before they finally step into what God prepared. The enemy knows he cannot stop God's plan directly, so he tries to exhaust your faith instead. He tries to convince you that nothing is changing. But things are changing. You are changing. Your spirit is becoming stronger. Your discernment is growing deeper. Your relationship with God is becoming more real. Even this difficult season is shaping you into someone capable of handling greater responsibility, greater blessings, and greater purpose. One day you will look back and thank God for the doors that stayed closed. You will thank Him for the delays that protected you. You will understand why certain seasons felt lonely, confusing, and painful, because everything was preparing you for what comes next. So do not define your life by your current struggle. This is not your final chapter. God is still healing, still restoring, still positioning, still working behind the scenes. And the same God who carried you through every painful chapter before this one will also carry you into the breakthrough that is waiting ahead. Your story is not ending in defeat. It is unfolding into purpose. You were brought here to remember who you are, not who pain told you that you were, not who rejection tried to convince you that you were, not who fear whispered you had become after all the battles you survived, but who God says you are. Because somewhere along the journey, many chosen people forget themselves. Life has a way of exhausting the soul. The disappointments pile up, the unanswered prayers become heavier, the betrayals leave scars, and slowly, without realizing it, people begin to lose sight of their identity. They stop seeing themselves through God's eyes and start seeing themselves through their wounds. Maybe that happened to you. Maybe the constant struggles made you question your worth. Maybe the delays made you feel forgotten. Maybe the attacks against your life became so intense that you started believing something was wrong with you. But hear this clearly today. Your struggles did not change your identity. You are still chosen. The enemy's greatest goal was never just to hurt you. His goal was to make you forget who you are spiritually. Because a person who forgets their identity becomes easier to control with fear, doubt, insecurity, and hopelessness. That is why the enemy attacks your confidence so aggressively. He knows that once chosen people fully awaken to their spiritual identity, they become dangerous to darkness. A person who knows God walks with them cannot be easily manipulated by fear anymore. And maybe that is why this message found you today, not by chance, not randomly, but because heaven wanted to remind your spirit of something you almost forgot. You are not weak because you struggled. You are not abandoned because life became difficult. You are not worthless because people failed to recognize your value. Your identity was never supposed to come from people in the first place. People change. Opinions change. Circumstances change. But God's calling over your life does not. Before the world ever formed opinions about you, God already knew your purpose. Before anyone rejected you, heaven had already chosen you. Before your worst mistakes, before your painful seasons, before the heartbreak and confusion, God still saw the person you were becoming, and He never changed His mind about you. That truth is powerful because many people secretly believe their brokenness disqualified them from purpose. They think because they struggled emotionally, spiritually, or mentally, they can no longer be used by God. But throughout history, God has always used imperfect people, people with scars, people who doubted, people who fell down and got back up again. Your wounds do not cancel your calling. In fact, some of the deepest pain you survived may become part of the testimony that helps someone else survive their own darkness one day. Nothing in your life was wasted. Not the tears, not the waiting, not the heartbreak, not even the moments when you almost gave up. God can use every broken piece of your story for purpose. But first, you must remember who you are. You are someone who survived battles that should have destroyed you. You are someone God kept alive for a reason. You are someone heaven continues to protect even when you cannot see it clearly. Think about all the moments you could have completely fallen apart. The emotional exhaustion, the silent suffering, the nights when your mind was overwhelmed with fear and uncertainty. Yet somehow, despite everything, you kept going. That strength did not come from nowhere. God has been carrying you this entire time. Even when you felt alone, He was near. Even when you felt forgotten, He was watching. Even when life felt silent, heaven was still working behind the scenes. And the reason you are hearing this message now is because your spirit needed awakening. You have spent too much time doubting yourself, too much time shrinking your light, too much time believing lies spoken by fear, rejection, and disappointment. But this season is different. God is calling you back into alignment with your true identity, not an identity built on pain, not an identity built on failure, not an identity built on human approval, but an identity rooted in Him. You were created with purpose. You were created with intention. You were created to overcome. The enemy tried to bury your confidence because he feared what would happen if you fully awakened spiritually. He feared the moment you stopped seeing yourself as broken and started seeing yourself as chosen. Because once that shift happens internally, everything changes externally. Chosen people walk differently when they remember who they are. They stop begging for validation from people who cannot understand their purpose. They stop allowing fear to control every decision. They stop shrinking themselves to fit into places God already outgrew them from. Instead, they begin trusting God boldly. And that is exactly what heaven is trying to awaken inside you now. Not pride, not arrogance, but spiritual confidence. The confidence to believe that God is still working in your life. The confidence to trust that your story still matters. The confidence to rise again after every battle, because your current struggles do not define your future. God does. And the same God who brought you to this message is reminding you today that you were never ordinary. You were never forgotten. You were never fighting alone. You were brought here to remember who you truly are. Chosen, protected, guided, and deeply loved by God. One day you are going to look back at this exact moment and realize it changed something inside you. You will remember the night when God interrupted your fear with faith. The moment He replaced your confusion with clarity. The second He reminded you that your life was never random. Because chosen ones always feel different before they become different. And while others may overlook you now, heaven already knows your name. God did not preserve you through all those battles for nothing. He did not carry you through heartbreak, rejection, loneliness, and spiritual warfare just so you could quit before your purpose is revealed. You survived because your story is still being written. The doors that refused to open were not your doors. The people who walked away were not assigned to your destiny. The delays were not denial. Everything has been aligning for a greater purpose. And from this day forward, you must stop seeing yourself through the eyes of fear and start seeing yourself through the eyes of God. You are not here by coincidence. You are here because heaven wanted your attention. So walk boldly, pray fearlessly, trust deeply. Because the same God who brought you to this message is already preparing the next chapter of your life, and it will be greater than anything you lost.